Today is September 8th, 2022. I'd like to call to order the Shade Tree Commission meeting. All right, if we could have a roll call, please.
Adams?
Here.
Maxwell?
Here.
Wagner? Mr. Mehallow?
Here.
And Mr. Rice is absent.
And turn on your microphones, guys, gals, everybody. All right. All right, could we please stand for a moment of silence? We'll do the pledge. All right, and if we could do a pledge of allegiance. Starts right there. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, could I have a motion to consider approving the agenda?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, passes unanimously. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from May 12th, 2022?
Yes.
All right, and if so, then can I have a motion to consider approving the minutes from May 12th, 2022?
Approve.
Motion,
Motion.
second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, first up on the list is presentation discussions about West Chester Pike Tree Planting Project. Paul?
Good evening, Paul Seligson, 4727 Mill Hollow. Thank you. So when I started this project, I did not know that West Chester Pike is going to be further widened. But there is a widening coming up March, April, May, June of 2023. That kind of implies that the idea of planting trees on West Chester Pike should be postponed because, you know, to get a watering truck in there, and if we're down to one lane of traffic and all the soot and dirt and grinding up cement, and that all goes into the tree leaves, and there is, so originally I came to you all suggesting 60 places where trees might be considered. I'm now down to 6.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, I can tell you where the 6 would be. So, well, the Brinchester, they want 4 trees, but they're off the map because they're way down at Bryn Mawr Avenue. That's exactly where the widening is going to be. So I suggest we skip over that. And then the Howard Dorn, there's a crabapple that never flourished and it needs to be replanted, and so that's easy. Liberty Gas wants 2 trees. They've said that if it would be permissible with PennDOT, they would take a tree right there at the corner of Bishop Hollow Road and West Chester Pike. I don't know if you can visualize that. First Baptist Church, I asked if they wanted 6 trees. They came back to me and said, no, we want 4 trees. So they want 4 trees. And probably I can get 4 trees at Stratford School. This is all in parts of West Chester Pike that are not being widened. So in sum total, this is what I have to say. We could either go with 6 trees, so to speak, 6 or 8 trees. I could have 6 or 8 trees planted the end of this year, November, and then watered in the beginning of 23, all through the year, 6 to 8 trees. Or we just postpone the whole thing until after the widening of West Chester Pike. And I really don't quite know how to do this. So I sort of lean to you guys to tell me what you all think.
What do you guys think? Thoughts?
I think holding off makes sense.
To postpone.
Oh, absolutely.
All of them?
No, I put.
I mean, put the
those
ones
ones
you
up near
can.
Liberty,
Yeah.
that section's all done and everything. If you want, I mean, as long as George could water them.
Right. So we're talking 8 trees. 8 trees and with tree gator bags, and that's like twice a month, year 1. So that would be twice a month in the year 2023, once a month in 2024. That's the idea. I'm wondering what happens to the 5 trees in front of St. Albans Shopping Center. That's Casey's, Hassey's, UPS store. There are 5 trees that were planted by the landowners there, I want to say 4 years ago in 2018. And it would, I would love so much to hear that perhaps we could transplant those trees if they're going to widen. If in widening West Chester Pike, they push through those trees. I don't know for the 2 tree guys, I'm looking, at you guys. Are those trees transplantable or have they been in too long and now are they?
I mean, they're probably in what, 4 or 5 years?
Or
I mean, are they widening? I mean, I don't know if they're widening that part there, are they? I don't know.
They're not working on that section.
Yes, they are going to be widening that part. And I'm working with the engineer right now on exactly how that's going to be done, because there's a possibility there'll actually be sidewalk put in, which may or may not be an issue for the 4 trees that are there, or 5 trees that are there, in regards to what size they would be. And so depending on how big they grow, we want something that's probably smaller at that location, just in regards to the size of how, the diameter of what the tree is going to grow, just because it's only going to be about a 2-foot a planting area.
I mean, are they moving all the poles back and everything?
No, the poles will stay where they are. The curb will be moved back a little bit, and then very little bit, and then my understanding is that the back of the sidewalk would be right up against the poles that are there.
Because I thought the poles were almost at the edge of the road.
They're,
From putting the banners up all those years,
uh,
I think they're right against the edge of the road, right against the curb, basically. Maybe
I
this far
think
back
they're
from it,
taking more out on the other side than they are on that
more
side.
the medial strip.
Towards the medial strip, if I recall right. I know it's a tight area, but I also know that the trees that are there, I mean, I think they can be taken out if we can take them out and save them, but I think they're going to have to be, I think we're going to have to look at what the species is that would go back in order. 1, you've got poles that are there, so you have power lines, and then on 2, you're going to have sidewalk right there as well.
Yeah, but basically, I mean, if they're just doing what they did in the rest of the road widening, there's just not going to be a shoulder anymore.
There will not be a shoulder.
Yeah, so I mean, whatever's there is there. So I mean, they'll probably take some of the medial strip and just, there'll be no shoulder.
Yes, that is correct.
Especially if they're not moving the poles back.
I say, George, do you recall? I don't think they're moving the poles at that location. I know we're moving 4 or 5 poles, but I didn't think it was at that location.
So what's the timing on, you want to transplant these trees? Is that what we want to do?
I do. I mean, I'm making that recommendation.
So-
Sorry. I'm making that recommendation that you all consider that. I don't know where they would go. In theory, they're owned by the landlords of that strip shopping center. So could they be taken anywhere in the township? I don't think so. I think they belong somewhere in there, but I don't know where.
It comes down to timing.
Yep.
If it's June, we're not going to transplant. It's not worth the risk. Right? July, August, if it's November, December, we can find a place to put them and they're manageable. It makes
I think
sense
that's
to
a great
transplant.
idea is to,
Or they might be okay where they are. It depends where, if the curb's going to be moved back X amount of feet, they might be fine.
I understand, but coming back to the point that now it's June and it's discovered that they need to be moved, and to move a tree in June, it's not such a great
Oh.
idea. I mean, one sort of is facing, we either move them like the end of November, December, or sort of get ready to say ciao if they're deemed like in the way.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends where the sidewalk's gonna go and everything. If they're putting sidewalk in there, it might
There
be-
is a plan about this. I haven't seen it up close. I know there's a very definite plan.
When are they going to start the road widening project?
So I hear from, is March, April? 23.
Do we have a place to put the trees? In the meantime, are we going to find a permanent place for them or just temporarily transplant them and then put them back somewhere? That's your question for Jake.
Great idea.
Yeah.
George, you don't want them in your.
I mean, you'd have to find out where the actual sidewalk, if it's even gonna be involved,
Right,
if they're gonna be in the way
right. Well,
before you
yeah.
do anything.
Yeah, I probably would not think it would be wise to take responsibility for somebody else's trees, transplanting them, holding them, and then if anything happens, we'd be liable for them.
Agreed.
I will say this, that there is intent to be a planting area for the trees there. I mean, that's one of the things that we've requested in that area. And I'm not 100% sure the sidewalk's going to be put in today. We're building it so we can put the sidewalk in at that location. I know, I'm not sure about the funding. And so that's one of the things I'm working on. But I would say that you have an opportunity. I think there's a spot there to still have trees. I'm not sure if those trees are the best trees to have in that spot. That would be the conversation I think we should have. And then what you do with the ones that come out, if they've been paid for, I think, as Georgia said, if they've been paid for by the business owners, I'm not sure that we take them and go do something else with them unless the business owners sign off that they don't want them or something.
Thanks, Tim.
But just to conclude, my recommendation would be for you all to make a letter to the landowners, and I don't know who they all are. They're different from the businesses. Some of them are the businesses, but some of them are not the businesses. You know, I know, for instance, that Casey's owns their building, Hassey's owns his building, but all the rest of them are up for grabs. You know, it could be absentee owners. I just don't know who they are. I have an observation though. May I move to another subject?
Sure.
There were 3 trees that were planted in Drexel Lodge Park, and I believe it was in connection with Arbor Day. And I don't know what, but they're looking really, really peaked. I don't know if they've been getting their allotment of water or what's their situation. But I'm just, if something doesn't happen, it looks like they might not make it. So that's my thought. Thank you. So we agree that I'm going to continue for 8 trees.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Okay. Next on the agenda are reports. 7.1, report on trees removed at Drexel Lodge Park. Good segue. I'm not sure who is reporting out on that. Is that George?
The sycamores. Yeah. So when the Public Works Department started installing the 2 bocce ball courts over at Drexel Lodge, the staff noticed that 2 of the sycamore trees looked sickly. We saw what we thought were problems. Again, we're not real knowledgeable in those things. So we called John. John came over and looked at them, and he identified the others were okay, but the 2 that we were concerned about needed to come down. So we did facilitate taking them down because I think they were determined to be a hazard tree. They did not come down because of the bocce ball courts going in. They came down because while we were there, we found that they were hazard trees.
Both trees had a substantial decay at the base.
Great. Thanks for letting us know. And then, so George, about Paul's point about the trees looking a little peaky. One was.
Sure. So those trees are watered regularly. They have gator bags on them. They've got all the protection on them. This has been a very rough season for trees.
Yes.
It's been a horrible season up in our tree nursery and other trees that we planted in other locations. So that's where we're at. We try, but there's only so much you can do.
Sure.
But they do get, they get their water.
Okay, thank you. All righty, moving on then. 7.2, reports from the EAC liaison, Cindy Mehallow. Cindy?
Cindy Mehallow, EAC Liaison, 87 Hunters Run. I have one item to report on and one question. The item to report on is that subject to your approval tonight, we are continuing to make plans for a tree planting at Brookside Park on Friday, September 16th and 17th. And I believe that you will discuss that later on. The second item is more of a question, and it's something that came up at the EAC meeting on Monday. And that is, we were wondering what the status is of the shade tree ordinance. The one that is online is dated June 2020, I believe. But it was my understanding that that was in the process of being reviewed and revised. And we would just like to know what the revision status of that is.
That's a good question.
Yes, the only thing I can offer is that I did reach out to Mr. Moore, who is interested in that document, and I've not heard back as of today's meeting.
Okay. Right. Do you have any other updates, Stephen, on it, perhaps?
I can tell you that he told me that it's getting near. We'll hopefully have something for you at your next meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Okay, moving on then to section 8 here, approved permits. The first one is 4500 Fairview, removal of 3 trees. Andy, are you reporting out on
Well,
that?
I guess what I can clarify is Drexel is landscaping applied for several permits that are under review today. I believe that this one is requires a permit because of section 158-9C parentheses 1, mainly because it's the trees located in a right of way. And in regard to that subsection, it requires your approval and a tree work permit.
Okay. All right. Since Rob can't vote, so you're gonna abstain, I guess. Yep. So may I have a motion in order to, or first, does anybody have any questions about the project?
No.
No?
No.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the removal of 3 trees at 45 Fairview? Motion, second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Right? Passes with the 4 of us. And so next on the agenda is 27 Dunminning, the building of a new single-family home on the site.
Correct. If I may, here again, I believe that the requirement is identified in subsection 158-10B, parens 1, parens C and D, mainly because the property is under a plan and under a demolition plan, and there will be grading effects. So those 2 sections speak to that, and the permits required because the area of demolition is greater than 500 square feet. And the number of trees that are being taken down, I believe, are more than, there's more than 6 trees greater than 12 inches in diameter. So that's the requirement of the ordinance. I do believe Mr. Hochback did a review of the site plan, and I believe that
That's correct. I did meet with the architect on site, the landscape architect. We went through the removals, the comstory replacements. The only thing that he had to mitigate was actually the tree protection fence, which he has updated that plan. It was sent to Giovanna from Stantec. In terms of 158, he's in compliance other than just the work permit, which is what he's seeking right now.
So, and the trees were removed already before coming in here. Is that correct?
Yes, sort of, kind of. Because they didn't, I guess the applicant, and I can let Pat and Mr. Emerson speak on that. I believe they didn't see the stipulation with the work permit.
Yeah, when the demolition permit was filed and issued, it was identified that a tree work permit would be required. I think there was some miscommunication. It kind of got lost in the shuffle on the applicant side.
I think they saw my letter from Giovanna stating that they're okay in terms of the trees, and, you know, that was.
And so the location of those trees that were removed, can you describe kind of where they're located on the property? It's my understanding they were on kind of a steep slope, and there could be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Evening, I'm Patrick Stewart. I'm the landscape architect for the project. Scott Emerson is the applicant. So the trees that were removed were really within this limit of disturbance to construct a new home. The steep slope back here, there's a number of trees that are being preserved back there. And there's some trees along the slope in here that are being preserved, but predominantly they were within the footprint and the grading of the footprint of the houses where they were removed from.
And how many?
Total was total of 9 trees were removed that were healthy. There was also 5 Cornus Florida that had anthracnose, and there was a 22-inch quercus that was in severe decline with over 75% dead in the canopy on our site inspection. So 9 and 5 and 1.
So the dogwoods had a fungus, in other words, and the oak had some decay in the canopy,
Yeah,
or where was
yeah.
the?
Bacterial leaf scorch and had over 75% dead wood in the canopy. Was pretty bad shape.
Okay. And so that one isn't required, and the dogwoods nor that unhealthy tree are being required to be replaced, correct?
The replacement under your ordinance was required trees that were coming down. 28 were total to be replaced. We've provided 30 replacement trees,
Okay.
and then 14 of those 30 were canopy trees.
Okay.
We
And
picked species that John recommended from your list.
sure.
Yep.
Okay, and then the location of the replacement trees?
We used a lot of the large canopy trees, which we used white oak, hackberry, and tulip tree. Sorry. Can you see that back there?
No.
She forgot her binoculars.
So there's a stormwater going.
Okay.
We thought, you know, to this sloped area that is back here, has some wooded. Thought it'd be best to put some of those large canopy trees back in that area. We put some Norway spruce here to give the state privacy. We have a couple more white oaks out here, some tulip. And then we had to actually use serviceberry and redbud, some understory trees.
Okay, all right, so it looks like, and so Darby Creek is in close proximity, correct, of the property? Okay, okay, all right. That's good. I asked all the questions. You guys have
No.
questions?
No, I'm good.
All right. So I know there's a few people that are interested in commenting on this. So is it okay with you all to invite public comment on this project? All right. So if there's anyone that would like to come up and speak, please do so. Just say your name and I believe your address is required.
Hello, I'm Bruce Killen. I've township resident, lived on Dunminning Road for 33 years. It's a development of about 18 or so houses on the cul-de-sac street. It was built in 1954. I live about 300 yards down from on the Darby Creek from the house that is being discussed. And I have a couple of points. One, I was disturbed to see all the trees taken down in the front yard. I'm not an expert on either the ordinance or the plans or the arborist letter, but it just seems unfortunate to me that those trees were removed. It's the first time I've heard that they've been distressed. But it seemed like a very aggressive, unnecessary cutting. Disturbs me further that the developer, who's done a lot of work in our township, elected to go forward without the permit. I feel like we've been taken advantage of a little bit. And I know there's some consequences. There was a stop work order. I don't see any other consequences as a result of him violating this permit. We lost a lot of trees, a lot of big trees to be replaced by relatively small trees, but they're gone. The reason I wanted to talk tonight was twofold. One is to talk about this property, and secondly, maybe the township can learn some lessons here. About the property, the trees in the front yard are gone. I'm disturbed that the trees in the back of the property will be cut down. They're on a steep slope that runs down into township property, into a location that has historic significance, and also runs into Darby Creek. Darby Creek goes through my backyard. I lose 6 inches a year of stream bank as a result of activity upstream. Like I said, I've been there 33 years. I've seen some renovations. I'm happy to see people invest in the community. I've seen some tear downs. But in the last 12 months, counting this property and the property next door, we're losing over 70 trees. The neighbor next door took down 50 trees with no consequence. And I know that's covered by a different ordinance, but this ordinance that covers the new development seemed like it could be bolstered a little bit to include some consequences and some really compensation to the community. Those trees belong to all of us, and they're now gone. And I've got to wait 50 years for them to be grown back. The second part is the creek. Like I said, the neighbor took down 50 trees, and we're getting additional flow on my creek. And the people that on the street behind us, St. Dave or Paper Mill, are appalled at what they see now on that property. I'm on the EAC, which makes people come to me and complain. And there's nothing I can do about this, circumstance other than maybe write a memo. But I'm not sure if the tree cutting's done, but I would suspect that the future resident or the developer would be tempted to take down more trees in the backyard. I know the previous resident, the O'Driscolls, were sensitive to that, and they left the trees. But I think the potential exists to take down more trees, kind of under the radar, either small or large, maybe to provide a view of the creek or to allow for the development of this house. Second point is, the other point is in terms of the tree company. When I had electrical work done, my electrician said, "Do you have a permit?" The tree company, I guess it was MG, is who I saw in the street. They should be obliged, I think, to ask whether the property owner has a permit. And that didn't, I don't know if that happened or not, but I would suggest that those companies like MG in the community that operate in the community understand that there's a permitting process, and maybe even have to have a permit themselves, so they're more sensitive to the clear cutting that seems to be going on all over the township. What I have to say, right next door. I think it's 29. 50 trees. It's a real shame.
Scott, do you want to talk on any points about the?
Oh.
Discuss about any future cutting.
Good evening, I'm Scott Emerson with the Bentley Homes. Just to clarify a couple of the comments. Our intention is to, as a builder and understanding the value of neighborhoods and the value of selling our homes, we put a high priority on the retention of trees. That's a high value item. That's something that we prefer to do. We don't take anything more down than we want. This plan was designed, crafted, and redesigned to save more trees than what was initially proposed. Additionally, your comment about going into steep slopes, we're not proposing to do that. The heavy dashed line is the limit of disturbance. That's as far as we can go, as far as removing trees. So as far as going down that hillside, there's no intentions to do that now or in the future. And to the comment about us doing this under the radar, we had actually requested in July to be on the July Shade Tree Commission meeting agenda. We were told by the township engineer that wasn't required as long as we met the consultants' review comments, which we did. So as far as we were concerned, we did everything we were supposed to do. It's unfortunate that we're here now, but you know, if this would have took to rectify everything and bring light, but as far as we knew, we did everything by the book. And we tried to do everything by the book, and we try to do the best job that we can. We have a reputation for doing nice developments.
Thank you.
One other question. You're clearing any more?
Come up to the mic.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, are there plans to take down any more trees behind the back of the property leading to or on the steep slope? Or are you done the tree work? Okay.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments? Cindy? Sure.
Cindy Mehallow, 87 Hunters Run. It's my understanding that this property and the other property on Dunminning, in both instances, the significant number of trees were removed from both properties before any tree permit had been obtained. Is that correct?
I don't know about the property that Bruce is speaking to. I mean,
The one that was clear cut of 50 trees.
right,
Yes.
at 29. We have I have no knowledge of that. Right, yeah, so it could, so I mean, if that's so I guess, is that something, Andy, if that is new information to the township too?
It is not new information. We are well aware of it. It is not new information. The township's well aware of it. We are working on it with the property owner for a variety of issues that are greater than just the trees being taken down. Those trees were actually taken down, I believe, potentially before this ordinance went into effect. And secondly, those trees would have been able to been taken down by that property owner without the permit. Our permits are not typically for a resident who is coming in and taking trees down in their backyard. We do not control that. We have said that over and over again. This ordinance is for shade trees and in the right of way in the front yard. This ordinance works on trees that are what we would call heritage trees. And those are trees that are greater than 36 dBH. And then it also deals with all of the trees on township property. And so it is, I want to make sure, I mean, there's a problem with 29 and the township's addressing it, but it is not related to what should have been come before here with a permit at that time for the trees. Because what they did is they took trees down in their backyard. And as you all know, you do not control what happens in the backyard if it's just a tree that somebody's taking down in their backyard. The ordinance doesn't cover that. And it can't cover that. There's only so much that it can cover. And so that's one of those things. This issue is the fact that this is a development issue. And that's the reason why this particular property falls under the shade tree ordinance.
Thanks, Steve. All of that said, as a resident of Newtown Township and as someone who has devoted significant personal time and effort to planting trees in the township, I find it extremely disturbing that residents are still able to remove trees from their backyard and that the current ordinance doesn't cover it. The fact that the ordinance is now under review by an attorney, and I don't know what changes are going to be made. I would just like to go on record saying that I wish the township had a stronger ordinance, and I wish that the new ordinance did cover the trees in the backyard, because trees are part of the common good. Having a tree or not having a tree impacts the quality of life for everyone, the air quality for everyone, the water quality for everyone. And when a private resident removes trees from the non-right-of-way part of their yard, it costs you and me money, because the township is now trying to implement an MS4 stormwater management plan to reduce sediment in our streams. That's the largest cause of sediment is from erosion. Erosion happens more when you remove trees. So on one hand, we are allowing citizens like on 29 and 27 to remove trees, exacerbate erosion, and basically work at odds with what the township is trying to do in its MS4 plan, which will cost well over $1 million. And when we have initiatives like trying to plant 50 trees at Brookside Park, which involves a number of volunteers, a number of township boards and personnel, that can be offset by one property owner. It's very discouraging.
Thank you, Cindy. Have any more public comment? Okay. All right, so do I have a motion to, here's my agenda, to approve the permit for 27 Dunminning?
Motion.
First, a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. All right, the next is, so Rob, was yours also 3 Mulberry Lane?
Yes,
Okay,
and
so,
17 Bishop Hollow.
okay. And 17, all right. So did we handle that under the last item? Was that?
It's a different.
It's just
different
2
address.
different ones. Okay, all right. So, 3 Mulberry Lane, it's a removal of 1 tree. Andy?
This is an application that I don't think.
See, this, when I talked to Steve before, the way the ordinance is written, it kind of falls under, our thing falls under right now until it's changed. Under like what's under the land development, which is all trees, until we get our changes in. That's what until it's changed, I think we have to. Until it's changed.
Yeah.
Once it's changed, it's fine. That's what we're waiting for the solicitor to come back, so I don't have to come in for permits for.
Yeah, I mean, what I looked at was
I mean, I'm doing it for safe. I'm on the Shade Tree Commission. I'm not gonna have someone say that I'm cutting trees and I'm on here. You know what I mean? I'm just being safe and sorry. If you guys say I don't need it, I don't need it, but you know what I'm saying?
I do. And here again, if I'm reviewing it, what I would say is, I don't think it's necessary, but however, if it's a cautionary step to take and have this application approved, then by all means, I would motion.
Okay.
However, by our definition, a heritage tree is 36 inches or greater in breast height. This particular tree is 30.
It's like 30.
So that was they were the items that I reviewed based upon you.
I mean, like in Springfield, I do a lot of work in Springfield. Springfield's the same way. That tree would be no issue. I could cut that without a permit. Once it gets into the right of way, which we're trying to change what, not right of way, but
Define it more clearly.
the setback, what we define as a setback off the edge of the road, 40 feet, 50, or whatever we're trying to
Well, we
do.
do have a
you know.
definition of right of way, and I think it's pretty consistent with our other definitions of right of way in zoning and in land development. So here again, I mean, I don't want to reiterate what.
Right, like I said, like, I don't know if it's not, I mean, it's very unclear at this point, so I'm just doing it, so someone doesn't say, well, he cut it, how come I gotta get a permit? He, you know, that's the only reason I'm doing it.
All right. So, all right, so do I have a motion to approve the tree removal permit for 3 Mulberry Lane?
Motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Rob? Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
I
All right.
abstained, by the way.
Yes, and Rob abstained for conflict of interest. Same thing with the next item, 17 Bishop Hollow Road, removal of 2 trees. Was this the one at Eric Williamson?
No,
Oh,
this is up the corner here. It's 2
Oh.
ash trees.
And again, this application does require a tree removal, simply because it's in the public record.
Right, 2 ash trees that are dying.
okay. All right. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the removal of 2 trees at 17 Bishop Hollow Road?
Motion.
And a second? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes unanimously minus Rob. All right. Okay, new business. All right, let's, here come, discuss the Brookside Park planting plan. George?
Good evening, George Sharitz, Director of Public Works at Newtown Township. Steve, can you pull up the planting plan that's on the agenda? Thank you. So there had been a desire for a tree planting project by several entities and groups. And due to a variety of circumstances and timing of when it was looked to be done, Public Works offered to quarterback getting it together so that this planning could take place in September, as had been initially kind of desired, and some volunteers were gotten and orders had taken place. So our goal was at Brookside Park to propose a tree planting project that would, and planting locations that we thought would be easily acceptable to the Shade Tree Commission, to the Environmental Advisory Council, who was looking for something, especially for MS4 and adding trees, to the trails and greenways that our planning would never interfere with potential trail possibilities, and certainly with the Park and Rec Department, that no tree planting would interfere with active recreation or potential future active recreation at the property, as well as making sure that things like the playgrounds weren't blocked visage or those kind of things. So we have a seasonal help person, Dave Hilbert, who has been working with Public Works on tree maintenance issues. And Dave had offered to kind of quarterback this and come up with a planting plan. So I would invite Dave to come up and just share with you what he proposed.
Good evening, everyone. How do I scroll this map? Sure, well, I remember that. There we go. Thank you for scrolling. So there are 7 species. 4 of them, I believe the township has acquired the trees through the Chesapeake Bay Foundation partnership. They were distributing a large number of trees. I believe there was an application made, and the township is a recipient of quite a few, 150, I believe. So that's quaking aspen, basswood, hackberry, and sycamore. You can see the sycamore and the hackberry are clustered along the side of the road. For several reasons, the road is the lowest point. These are, fairly moisture-loving trees.
Sycamore a little bit more so than Hackberry. Also, the park once had has a declining alley of copper beech trees, which has now produced several gaps. You can see in the upper left-hand corner where the S's and H's are. Sycamores is sort of the classic road lining tree. Just figured it'll be an appropriate replacement. It's always nice to put elms. Elms were once almost driven to extinction by Dutch elm disease, but breeding has brought them back. So we are restoring an element of the canopy that was gone. The quaking aspen will line the little parking lot because they can fit into tight spaces, compacted spaces, which are what bounds a parking lot. And then on the slope, on the north-facing slope, which is relatively shady, a handful of sugar maples and basswood, because they are shade-tolerant sugar maples towards the northernmost limits of its range here. So a nice shadier north-facing slope is a good place to put it. So therein lies the reasoning for everything on the map.
Good. Any discussion?
Looks good to me. Yeah.
All right. Cindy, did you want to add anything?
I would have a question if the quaking aspen.
Should we go up to the podium?
You want to?
It's my understanding from the MS4 stream bank restoration plan that was submitted by the township engineer several years ago that this stretch of Fox's Run is potentially subject to stream bank restoration. And I'm surprised to see the trees planted by the parking lot because the stream is directly behind it. But I assume that this has been reviewed and approved by the township engineer. The other question I have is that G and I, G says it's a silver maple Acer saccharum, and I says it's a silver maple Acer saccharum.
Saccharum and saccharinum.
Saccharinum. Aren't silver maples not a good tree to plant?
They're not a great tree to plant directly by foundational structure, but so the cluster of trees that is near the stream.
Or am I thinking of a Norway maple?
Well, Norway maples are truly not great trees. Silver maples can be obnoxious in certain settings. But in where the 5 of them go, there's a cluster of elves. It is approaching Fox's Run, although there will be a buffer beside Fox's Run itself for any sort of more engineered reconstruction efforts. So the specific choice of the elm and the silver maple are just because they are floodplain trees, and being that close to the parking lot, it is the floodplain, but it is not the zone of the engineering of Fox's Run. So therein lies a choice. So silver maple, might not be great placed directly by the road. That's why we kept them away.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
George, are they all whips? Are they whips? The trees?
In a sense, like, are they small?
Yeah.
My understanding is that they're all going to be.
Okay. Any more discussion? Questions?
No.
Great. Do I have a motion to accept the Brookside Park planting plan?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is St. Albans Swim Club trees. I don't know who's presenting on that. No?
Nobody.
Nobody? All right. So should we table that then, I guess?
What was it in concern to?
I have no idea. I didn't remember seeing that. in the packet.
Steve knows.
Steve? Shed some light.
I actually think this may have been what you just talked about. I think that there might have been some question of what it was originally called, but I don't think we ever clarified that. And that may be why it was left on the agenda.
Okay.
So some people refer to that area where St. Albans Swim Club, and some people refer to it as Drexel Lodge Park. It is Drexel Lodge Park. They just happen to be right next to St. Albans Swim Club.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. All right. Okay, so we have two more planting applications. I know we probably should have talked about this in the beginning when we approved the agenda, but is there any objection to just talking about these two applications before we get into the rest of the agenda? Talk about that and that. Yeah, 3111 Sawmill and then the Garrett Williamson planting or planning application. That sound okay with you guys? Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's talk about 3111 Sawmill. Is there anyone that's going to present on that? Andy?
I think I can maybe walk us through the introduction. That's really what this plan is. It's going to be a subdivision application followed by, I don't know if he goes by a certain developer's name, but essentially it takes a large 11-acre property and subdivides it into smaller parcels. And it will fall under that land development subdivision planning section of our ordinance. With that, because they will be removing trees on it with part of the development, I wanted to at least put it before you as simply an introduction.
Okay.
I think what will need to happen is Washbox will have to do a preliminary review. I don't think that the planning application meets any of the conditions of the ordinance. So I'm sure that'll show up in Mr. Washbox review and it'll go out to them. And they'll have to revise it. So hopefully we'll put this back on the agenda in October, further discussion.
Okay.
And again, just to reiterate the fact that with land development, under the MPC subdivision, we have a limited time frame to work within. That's why I wanted to get.
Okay. Yeah, and we're gonna make sure that the application that they provide for the shade tree is complete, right? So it's gonna have the full planting plan and just like it says on page 2 of the application, because it seems like we're getting a few applications in that aren't complete.
So what happens is a few times people have sent stuff to us that were totally not compliant. So then I call the actual engineer, walk them through the ordinance. A lot of times didn't even know it existed. They come back, make changes. I tell them they have to fix this, and then they finally send a fully compliant plan.
Okay.
So it's been working pretty well that way. This one, obviously, we speak.
Okay. So this is more of an FYI for us right now and just to keep it on the radar. Okay. All right. Excellent. Yes.
I think what you're going to hear again, that's more of a, it's a school and educational facility we're looking to build. It will come under our land development. And I think the biggest effect to around the treescape is the fact that they've got to run a sewer line. There's some discussion between the engineers as to how exactly that's going to run, but there's going to be a fairly large spot cut through fairly steep slope down from the Garrett Williamson property down into, I believe that would be part of the park, correct? So, there's going to be significant placement.
So is there, so I guess they're doing just a cut trench? Is that what they're proposing?
Sewer layout.
and I know this is probably outside our lane, but can I just ask a question just on, I guess, on chapter 148, I guess, in the land development? Do we typically recommend alternatives? Like if there's opportunities to avoid, to avoid trees and such, I mean, do we normally make those recommendations to do that first? Okay, yeah, right, so, right. Right, so is there any reason why, other than potential cost, that, because that looks like an open trench, can they horizontal directional drill any of that pipeline instead of doing a cut?
Have the engineers here
Okay,
to discuss the reason why they had to that path. I know that Chester Valley is the land development engineer, working for the applicant, and there was a meeting held with the sewer authority engineer. There was some discussion about slight differences in path from an engineering perspective. So I think that all has to be considered. Probably best for them to.
okay. So walk me through that process, please. So when would we have that opportunity to ask those questions? Would that be next month when this comes before us? Or is there an opportunity to provide comments and concerns ahead of time so that they can consider them? Okay. Okay. Right.
You'll do the review.
Okay.
I'll answer that question.
Okay.
Sure, and have that ready if they don't have the answer. Obviously.
Sure,
So,
there usually is.
whoever in front of us, I can go ahead.
But it appears to be following a line of topography that, you know, probably, yeah.
And I just would mention that as with any committee, you know, you have the right to attend the planning commission meeting where they'll be going through this in detail.
Okay.
And if you have questions that you want answered, that's a great opportunity because you'll probably have both the township engineer and their engineer sitting there where we may not have, you know, the engineer for the applicant might come here, but probably our township engineer won't be here. So if you would have a question, that would be a way to address that.
So is this going to be, has this already been discussed or is this coming up on a planning?
This is coming up with September planning. Here again, because of our 90-day time constraint, got to get it in front of you. Just to begin this is the beginning of that process.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the other thing that I have to say that you've got to consider is the location of the.
Sure.
So they are there at the bottom of the hill, and there's only a certain number of ways that they can connect from the facility at the top.
Yeah, I even following that same line, I would just like to understand if there's another option, such as horizontal directional drill that pipe instead of having an open.
I think there's a section shown on that plan that speaks to directional drilling, but that is located base of the hill and probably for the other thing I think, I don't want to speak for the party, but they're going to be concerned with any kind of pre-planned over what would be dedicated to.
Sure.
Could potentially be a dedicated. Simply because of the root damage caused on that. So there's a lot of considerations that have to be made, and they have to really explain it to you folks.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. All right, thank you. Okay, so moving on for discussion of 2023, I can't believe it's 2023 coming up already. Goals, priorities, and projects, and I think that's going to probably tie into the next agenda item too, which is talking about the budget. So, so I know that's something that Steve has asked us to get before him so that he can provide that recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. And so, Steve, can I ask a question while we're, because this all sort of ties in. So if you don't mind, I'm
Yeah.
just going to.
Real quick, Trish, if I may,
Sure.
I'm gonna depart with Dave. Dave's gonna be doing some inventory work at the park. And before it gets dark, I want to show him some
Okay,
mapping
sure.
stuff. So
Absolutely.
we started before
You
the
guys
meeting.
are excused. Thank
guys.
you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, we allowed to make a sick visit. We can probably stop out there. Okay. Probably stop out there. Us. Why? Oh, check it out. I know, so
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So I know you mentioned that if we had requested items or if we had something, can you explain more about what our options, I guess, are under, I guess, a budget for the shade tree?
So I'm going to speak a little bit about what some of your options, and obviously, you have already done a couple things that we've kind of put through outside of what was planned originally in the budget, just because of timing. And one of those things was the program to be actually able to record the trees that you're responsible for keeping information on as part of the ordinance. And so we have we've done that. So if there was something else in that realm that you needed to be able to continue to move forward in that way, that would be something that you might put in the budget. George does some money set aside for shade tree. I say shade tree purposes, but township trees and maintenance as part of his budget. And I am not off the top of my head, I can't remember how much you set aside for 2023, but I know he's done that with what we think it would take us to maintain trees on township property in 2023. So we've kind of done that on that side for you, just to make sure that we're covering that, because we have a pretty good idea. And I say we, George has a really good idea. I'm along for the ride, but George has a really good idea of what needs to be done, particularly at our parks and, some of those types of properties that, Goshen Road Trail are areas that we have a fair number of ash trees or trees that are in decline that we're having to watch and do for takedowns and then do replacements and those kind of things. And so George and his team have stayed really on top of that. And so we put those dollars in the budget on your behalf. And then, so the piece that you may be looking for, if you think about the couple things that I would throw out to you is obviously if there was any additional feeling that you needed for your software, if you needed an additional iPad to be able to record what it is that you need to do in order for you to do that number of things. I know that we are on your behalf making a recommendation that Dave, who you met just a few moments ago, would stay on between now and the end of the year. We're going to make that recommendation Monday night, and that one of his roles would be to start helping to go through and inventory trees, just to get us started, because we want to at least make sure we have a good inventory of what was planted last year, make sure all of that's done, but we also want to start in some areas where we know that we've planted other trees in the last several years. Make sure we get all of those on and then start going back and start building. As we've talked about before, there are quite a few pieces of property that you're responsible for from the township side, as well as then shade trees. And George and I have been talking about a couple other things there in regards to how do we track not only street trees and township property trees, but also the MS4 trees that we're looking at. And so we've got multiple things going on And, we believe that you're not necessarily responsible for tracking the MS4, but we are looking to see whether the software that you're using can be used to do both, just so that you're aware of that. And if it can do both and allow us to have like two different layers, like we pull off the MS4 piece that are not on township property, that are not on shade trees, that you would be responsible for, then that's something that we would want to do. And so
I was just gonna say,
I think-
when John was giving us the training, I was almost 100% sure that was possible.
Okay, so good. We actually confirmed that, I guess.
Yeah.
George confirmed that.
Oh,
this
that's
evening.
awesome. Great. Okay.
So that you understand that that's going to be looked at, and we're going to look at that. We may end up adding to that. If there's something else, if there's another user license, we may need to look at doing that so that we can make sure that we have a way to track that and then send that to our engineer to be able to do reporting back when we report back on our MS4 permit. The other thing that I thought about for you all is that you would be the ones who, as you did this year, any planning around Arbor Day. And so you may need some dollars to allow you to do whatever it is that you want to do for that. And so that may be something else that you would ask for in dollars. George, do you know of anything else that right now, I couldn't think of anything else related to shade tree. Those are the key things. And you may have something different. We'll cover the changes to the ordinance under our ordinance changes that you don't need to worry about, like that kind of piece. If we were going to do something where you want to do a brochure, reminding homeowners that they need permits if they're doing things for certain things for trees, that all would be things that you would potentially need to do.
Yeah, because I think that once, I know we've really suspended doing any kind of major outreach about the ordinance until we have a final one to reduce confusion. I think it's confusing enough as it is. So without changing it and say, oh, guess what? Well, no, that was under the old one. No, it's this one. So yeah, if we could add to that, and I don't know what the right way to do it. I mean, I think that's something that we as a committee or commission need to discuss, is like, how do we do the outreach and maybe work with township staff that do that? Because is it a brochure? What do we do and to get the word out that's going to be most effective, not only from effective, like everybody hearing about it, but also cost effective as well.
Sure.
So I would think that, and having brochures or having those little cards like we made up for Arbor Day, I think having the QR code with the ordinance on the back is fabulous. I use mine because I struggle finding anything on the website. So although I've gotten better. So I think that would be good. Outreach is one of the things. So that kind of all ties into kind of some of the things that, for our priorities, but that's kind of my key question that I had. So it sounds like that we could either do printing of flyers or something that would accompany, that automatically is distributed when a landscaper or a tree company comes in for their business permit from the township to work in the township, that they would be handed that as well, and so that they would be made aware. And maybe there's other ways that we do better outreach for the public to get the word out. So we'll need to brainstorm on how to do that.
If I can diverge from where you are just a second, just in fairness to what this is. So just as my understanding, one of the challenges that we have with this is that a tree contractor comes in and goes to do a project at your home. Okay, they do not need a contractor's license within Newtown Township to do that, because they have a contractor's license with the state as a small business and doing work in that way. And we cannot, by law, require
Mhm.
than to get a contractor's license with us. And so, I know some people said, why don't you require that for
Yeah,
tree
sure.
folks? It would be easy if I could.
Right.
My understanding is legally we cannot. And so we would not be able to do that.
So then again, it just is just like, well, then how do we get the word out? And
Yeah,
so-
the other thing would be, however, if that contractor is going and doing work, let's say, at a BPG or at a business that's in town, that's a commercial business, then they are required to have a contractor's license within the township. Just like if I'm a carpenter and I come into your house and I do work, my state license is fine. But if I do work on a commercial property in town, I'm required to have a contractor's license within the township. So I just want clarity
Sure.
there so that sometimes when people say, why aren't we making sure that every landscaper knows? Part of the reason is I don't have a list of all the landscapers that do things in town. And it's not like I can say you have to. I mean, it's easy for those that have their business and they're located in town because I can require a business license, but I can't require, so it's most of our tree companies that do work in town, I don't know that they actually are headquartered here in town. Some of them are, but not all of them are. And so there is some challenges. And I just wanted to make you aware
Sure.
that as you discuss this, we have looked at it. It's just not as simple as, oh, we'll just do this and everybody will follow through.
Right. And so, and this is where we get into conundrum, like what we're seeing here is like people just aren't aware, so they don't know they're violating. And then we come back and we do this swirl and.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. I mean, building permits have been expired since buildings were being built. And we're still chasing people around in contract. And owners,
Sure.
property owners around, who obviously know a building permit is expired, don't want to get one. So,
Right.
I mean, that's just inherent to what we do.
Sure.
Unfortunately, it is just.
Sure. We're just trying to
Right.
figure out, I mean, it's new and that's on, new-ish, I guess. So that's just what I was just thinking. So,
And I would make one other point here,
Sure.
then I'm sorry. It's like, why is he here?
you're always welcome.
But I would make one other point for you, and that is that, typically if someone chooses not to do a permit, our permit team has some opportunities because we can say you have to pay double the permit fee. If you'll recall, we purposely chose not to have a permit fee for tree work because we wanted people to come in and get the permits, and we didn't want to be a deterrent
Right.
on already what could be for some homeowner a pretty expensive project to start with. And so we can't double the permit fee on something that we don't even have a permit fee on. Now, what we might be able to do, and I'll talk to Rich before we do the final on the ordinance, is can we put a penalty in that for penalty for not pulling it?
There are currently, there's a penalty and appeal clause.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the end of this ordinance.
So,
However, we have some difficulties again, not that we can't do that. And in regard to 27, Dunminning, spoke about earlier.
Your mic's not on.
We certainly as soon as we found out about it, we went out, we issued a stop work order, and that generated conversation, right? They got shut down. The gentleman from Bentley made contact with me. We discussed it. That's how I came to find out that there was this, what I'd like to say, it was a mixed message, because my initial demo permit denied it. So we have to recognize that there was some miscommunication within our own organization as to what should have happened. It's a learning experience, let's say, but and here again, we could have, but what I've learned over my experience in 22 years of doing code enforcement, zoning, it's much more financially responsible for the township even to work with an individual like we did with this gentleman from Bentley, make him follow the procedures, make him come before you. He'll remember that. He won't make that mistake again, rather than issue a fine, especially when there was some fault miscommunication on our own part to cooperate with it.
Sure.
Because just issuing a fine and putting it in the hands of district court, it can somewhat be difficult going in that direction. It can cost us more money than what it's actually worth.
Totally agree. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's been my experience too, when you're doing regulations, just throwing a book at somebody is not really the most productive way to get compliance in the long run.
I think it has to be there.
Yes.
I mean, by all means, I think we have to have the ability to cite. And then in the alternative, the applicant has the ability to appeal, but it's there. Can we stiffen it up? Can we make it a little bit more, firm? Yeah, I think we could. But I think you got to look at each case for on its own merit.
Sure. Okay, that sounds good. Well, and I think, and everything again swirls back to the revision to the ordinance. So you're hiding in the dark, Stephen. I have another question though about that. Is it possible, because quite frankly, before he starts reviewing it and we start making changes, I think over the last year, our committee has learned a lot. And I mean, and certainly hearing other comments and concerns expressed by those on the EAC, I think there's a lot of merit there. Is there a way that we can maybe meet with the solicitor for a little bit to go over what the proposed changes are? And this, because I know that he had concerns about it not aligning, I think, with chapter 148. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So, and we hadn't really saw where that disconnect was. So is there, I mean, I don't think all of us need to be there, but
Yeah,
could we
I mean, we can
possibly?
do that. We can definitely do that as we move along. I will say that he has spent a fair amount of time looking at what the role can be of this committee.
Right.
And there are some very strict guidelines from the state of Pennsylvania
Mhm.
as to what your role can be.
Okay.
And so, though we would like, I think we would all like to see it maybe be different, it is limited to what the Pennsylvania statute says, and we can't go beyond that in that way. And what's interesting is that depending on the type of municipality you are, whether you're a township of the second class or a township of the first class, or whether you're a borough, or whether you're, one of the other options is a third class city, determines some of what you can do even as a shade tree commission. I mean, and so it's not all, it's sometimes it's limited by what the state statute is in general for shade trees. And sometimes, and in this case, I said that, and I'm not sure 100% sure it applies to shade trees, but it is something that I know that there is a limitation of how you can encroach on determining what an individual property owner can do versus what happens in chapter 148 of the planning and development side. That's a whole different story. We have a lot more latitude in what we can do and require about trees being taken down. And so, and this, I've had this discussion with lots of people, and this goes back to individual property owners' rights versus community rights. And that's always an issue, and we deal with that, and we deal with that even within our codes in regards to how close you can build to somebody else's land and all of those kind of things. And so it's this balance that we cover and that the challenge that we have. So I think I kind of went off a little bit, but the answer is, I think if you have areas of specific concern, if we can document what those are and get them to him, that then we put together the meeting to have that discussion, he would come prepared. Because some of these things, and the challenge is that he's had to do a fair amount of research going back and saying, what can we do as a second-class township specifically related to shade trees?
Okay, so, because I'm sure that, because we put forward some suggestions, and
And
so
he's-
I don't know what the draft currently looks like. So is there a way that we could have like the draft that he
Sure.
marked up and see what he's
Yeah, so
changed?
like one of the things that I know we talked about is we wanted to have a set from the roadway in. And I think we
Something
talked
similar.
about it, 30 feet or whatever it
20.
was. He believes that we cannot do that. And he believes that it has to be based off of the roads right away. And to,
So we're gonna make a resident stand in the middle of a busy road to measure off what the right of way is?
well, whether I mean, what I can tell you is I have a report on our roads that says, and I'll pick a road, whatever road you want. X road is 27 feet wide. So you really don't have to stand in the middle of the right of way. You can say, or in the middle of the road, you can say the road's 27 feet wide. If I say the middle of the road is 13.5 feet, then I start at that point and I go in on my property for the remaining spot that would be mine. So let me just take an example. And if I do my math wrong, you can tell me I did my math wrong. And I may change the width of the road to keep my math simple. But anyway, but if I say that the road width is 50 feet, I divide that by 2, and 25 feet is this part that's on my side of the roadway. And if I use that 13.5, if I do my math right, that means that there's 11.5 feet on my property that is still right away, if that makes sense. And so I would take from the edge of the roadway to that point, and that would be my 11.5 feet in that.
So
So
it'd be 11.5 feet from the edge of the road.
from the edge of the road, yeah, you wouldn't have to stand in the middle of the road to do that. The math, it's a little bit more of a challenging math question for those who have to subtract twice. And but we'll set it up, it could be something that we even set up a calculator on
That's
the
what
website that
right.
says, enter the road width, or enter the right of way width, enter the road width, and it actually calculates, it should be this far from edge of road.
And so, and then do we have a table with all the right of ways on every road that's in the
We
township?
have for our road,
Actually called the road evaluation program.
Mhm.
It's on the website.
Yeah.
Anyone.
Can't find anything on this website,
If
so
you-
If you go to the public works section.
if
And when you get there, you can look, I think it's on the left-hand sidebar. It'll say road evaluation program. Click on that. It's basically the chart that Steve was talking about.
That's
It
not
breaks down the
intuitive,
roads in
though.
alphabetical order. It breaks down the cartway width,
Uh-huh.
which is the actual paved surface, and then it gives you the right-of-way width.
Okay,
So
so,
when you do the math, as Steve described, you can kind of stand at the curb and measure in from the curb line, whatever that balance is, 11 feet or 13. That's your line. The other rule of thumb is you use any kind of like unmathematical way is look at the street. They're usually set at the edge of the right of way, like the telephone pole. Any kind of utility pole. They're always set in the right of way along the edge.
well, like, for instance, my house doesn't have any,
yeah.
so
That way
I,
you
So,
can just
so
do
if you
that.
looked on the map, it would tell you Gradyville Road is 27 feet wide. I may be off
Right.
by a couple feet, but 27 feet wide, and I believe it is a 50 feet right away. And so, that would be.
so
the-
that's fine, I mean, and we can do that, but I think we need to, that needs to be part of our outreach stuff, to make this
Absolutely.
simple, because I can tell you this much, I can't see my 90-year-old neighbor if they wanted to take a tree down trying to figure all that out. It's just not gonna work,
And,
so.
and here's the thing that I would say is that anybody that has trouble understanding what the requirement is, we should set it up so they contact the office. Our staff will know how to do the calculation. and we'll be able to lead them through that process and say, here on the website is this, it's this feet, and, you know, and then we can get them there. I mean, I understand it's a challenge, and I understand other communities have done it differently. Please, we've gone through this, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to stay within the guidelines that the state of Pennsylvania has given us.
Okay.
And we know that other communities do it differently. We don't have any question about that. But we have gone back and looked at what the code is, and we do not believe that we can do what we wanted to do originally.
Okay.
And we've looked at it extensively to do that.
All right, so then I think for our priorities, once we get, I'm throwing this out to you guys to see what you think. And this is just a preliminary discussion. I just kind of wanted to introduce it because I think by the December meeting, I think it'd be a really good idea if we have a good idea of kind of what we want to achieve next year. And like do the Arbor Day. How are we going to partner with the EAC on different projects? What does that look like? What do we need to do to plan ahead for that, to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row on different planting plans and things like that? But to me, I think number one is getting the ordinance square, because I don't even understand what we're supposed to be doing now. I'm so confused. So, and
I think if I can, just real quick,
Sure.
hopefully I can clarify it, and, you know, just to keep it really straightforward and simple. Your authority as a shade tree commission is really over three things. Your authority is, when it comes to trees, is any tree on township property.
Right.
That's easy, right? If the township owns the property, you have authority of whether that tree comes down, and other than in a hazard situation, we will be before you before we take down a tree, if we're taking down a tree on township property. Most of the time, we're only going to take it down if it's a hazard. That's typically what we do, but that's not 100% of the time. If we were doing something and a tree happened to be in the middle of it, we would bring before you, just like any resident or developer would be. So that's number one. Number two is you are responsible for any shade tree which is in the right of way. And we just talked about that definition of right of way. It is a moving target within the township based on road width that's actually there, and based on what the right of way was. Some right of ways are 50 feet, some right of ways are 75 feet, some right of ways are somewhere less than the 50 feet. And so it just depends. Then, and then finally is the heritage tree, which we have defined currently, which I believe we've asked to be redefined. Currently, it's 36 dBH, and based off of John Hosbach's recommendation, I think you all agreed that it should go down to 30. And so that would be the basis for us going forward, and that people would come in based on those things and be coming in for permits and your approval, and that would be where you sit over on authority. Education purposes are much broader than that.
Right.
You know, I think you have, you know, I think working with the EAC and really talking with folks about saying, you know, it is in the best interest of everyone that you not come in and clear cut your backyard. You know, that is a perfect opportunity to work together and do that. Your authority doesn't allow you, and when I say that, it doesn't allow the township. You know, the township doesn't have the authority to come in and say, you cannot take your trees down in your backyard. We just don't have it. We've looked for it, because I know that's what the desire of the EAC would be. That's what they would have wanted to present. In fact, I believe the first copy of the draft of the ordinance had that in it. I will tell you, the board wasn't ready for that, but in addition to the board not being ready, we've gone back and looked at it. We believe that what allows us to have a shade tree commission, which is what you are, is the fact that we control what are basically street trees, and those are the ones that are in the right of way.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's more like how we're to be reviewing these development plans, I think is my biggest, is what I mean. I know what I know what we're responsible for, that's kind of that part of it. I think it's in this regard, and then how do we convey when a homeowner needs to come in to get a permit. And I think we need to make that clear. And when you don't. So if we're having that consternation just within ourselves, I mean, how are we gonna expect the public to understand what they're supposed to be doing? So I think we need to get the ordinance kind of squared away. Work on our tree inventory, because that's one of our primary things, because that's gonna help with the MS4 and it's gonna help with helping Public Works keep track of trees that may need maintenance or there's concerns or something that's coming. I think that's going to be very proactive and helpful, but we have to do that. We have to figure out how to allocate that time. So that's one of my biggest questions with that. And then of course, we have our responsibility for Arbor Day. And so we need to think about, what do we want to do for Arbor Day? So I would love to hear your guys' idea, and, if maybe someone on our team could take lead on that and volunteer to take point on that and organizing that, that would be fantastic. And then also, what other kind of planting plans do we want to do with, maybe partner with EAC or with Parks and Rec, for instance?
And I would just make note on budget wise, if there is something that you specifically would like in the budget, I mean, ideally, it would be that you would let us know this evening or, come up with it this evening. But if it's not, if you would definitely finalize it in the October meeting, the first one that you have.
Okay.
That would be really important because the board is going to be looking at passing the budget in November.
Okay, so I think outreach, I don't know what kind of costs would be associated with outreach. I would leave that to you guys to figure, but I would think that how do we do outreach? And in what way do we send out flyers? Is it in the is it a mailer? What do we do in that regard? Is it just on the website or what? And then also, I think if we're going to be doing a tree inventory, and that's something that we are going to be doing as well, I think that is a daunting task that I don't think the 5 of us can really accomplish probably in our own lifetimes. So we would need to kind of figure out, there's a lot of trees out there on these parks, and we're planting more. So, and then maybe we need to really think about, what tools we need. So if we're doing that, we probably are going to need more iPads or whatever to do that. I would say at least 1 or 2 more would be helpful so that we can divide and conquer when we're out on different sites and trying to do that. But John has had some thoughts on how we can best maybe thumbnail estimate some things. So we might want to start there. So I think we need to figure out what the strategy on how we're going to do that. Thanks, Bruce. So I guess so outreach materials, whatever mailers or.
Yeah, we need to know specifically what you want to do, because an outreach material, if you're doing a mailer to every home, is very expensive.
Sure.
If you're having an outreach material that you're handing out at Arbor Day, we did that in-house for you this last time, and it was, I forget, I think it's like 8 cents a copy, and it's not a big deal, right? I mean, you make 100 copies or 200 copies, whatever you want, and we can do that. I think we need to understand what that looks like. I mean, we're happy to help you chase down what it would cost if I know what it is that you want, if that makes sense.
Can I make a statement? Just bullet this all down for us, and let's stop right there, because this is going way over everybody's head. We're just wasting time. But we'll we'll talk about it. We'll present it.
Okay.
And then we go from there.
All right, so we'll have some with you in the October.
Not 3.
Because
Just make sure you don't meet as a group and you don't make decisions.
Right. We're going to meet 1 or 2 only, and then that's it. And
Well, and in that, you don't make decisions.
Right, we'll make
you know.
decisions, just
We're
discuss.
just going to talk about it. All right, we'll do that.
Thanks.
We'll have an ad hoc. All right, okay. But I will say that do we want to have another iPad at least for doing the tree inventory?
We
I don't
haven't used
think-
the one we got already, so I
Yeah,
don't think we
I don't
need
think
one
I
yet.
think we got somebody working on the tree inventory,
Okay,
right?
all right,
You know,
Okey-dokey.
it'll all be in digital format,
all right.
right? Let's one step at a time.
Okay, so we had on there, so we were gonna talk about tree inventory. I think we tabled that one again. That's under old business.
Somebody's working on it. That guy that was sitting there's working on it.
Yeah, sort of. Okay. All right, so next is commission comment. I don't think we have any. I think we have enough content for the next agenda.
Yep.
Roles, responsibility, or talking about the ordinance and goals and objectives. And I think that will probably,
I
and
think-
coordination with the EAC.
But with everything. you want,
I will.
we'll do that.
Yeah, well, I'm just putting agenda items
Yeah.
for next
Yeah.
time. Is there any other thing on the agenda that you guys can think of right now? Okay, all right. Any more public comment? Yes?
Cindy Mehallow, 87 Hunters Run. I think I might have sent an email to you about this, but in talking about shade trees and the fact that you are street trees and that you have authority over street trees, there's a situation on Radnor Drive behind St. Anastasia where a homeowner apparently last year planted 9 trees. And I know some of the supervisors are aware of this and thought it was a wonderful thing that a homeowner took the initiative to plant 9 trees. And wouldn't it be great if more people did that? So I went over there and looked, and yes, indeed, they did plant 9 trees. I didn't focus on the fact that they probably are in the right of way. So possibly you should have control over that or something. But what I focused on is that they are all Bradford pear. And what a shame that they planted Bradford pear. And I'm aware of the fact that other states such as Ohio and Virginia, and I think one other one, have banned the sale and planting of Bradford pear. In fact, it's deemed such a hazard to the environment that in North Carolina, communities put a bounty out on Bradford pears and offered 5 native trees to anybody who cut down a Bradford pear. It has become such a destructive force in the native woods. So I was wondering if I know that you have a list of recommended trees to be planted. And I know that there is a part of the code which I forget what it's called, weeds and noxious plants, and talks about bamboo and the fact that bamboo is not allowed. And it also mentions things such as Japanese knotweed, which it encompasses under running bamboo. And I wondered if for your 2023 plans, you might, in addition to having your list of recommended trees, list of not recommended or even forbidden plants, and if you would consider adding Bradford pear to that part of the ordinance, making an update to that.
So what we do have, what's required under the ordinance is that we also provide a list of invasives and that. So what we decided as a group to handle that so that we wouldn't have to maintain that list, that we defer to University of Penn and their list. So we felt that
Penn
was,
State.
and Penn, I'm
Penn
sorry,
State.
Penn State, sorry, my bad. It's
okay.
late, I haven't eaten dinner.
I know.
So that's how we deferred to that. I mean, I think it's fine that we could have something that's to discourage planting. I think that would be fine. That could be part of the outreach too.
I'm sorry, I forgot to say Pennsylvania. The state has decided just in the last couple months, I'll send it to you.
Yes,
That Bradford
I've
pear
seen it.
should not be planted.
I've seen it.
So I wondered if we needed to bring our local code in alignment with that. I leave that to you.
Just what Cindy said. Chris said was that What they picked is the list from.
From Penn State
No, and
Extension.
I understand that, and that's a list of recommended trees not be planted. That's not like, saying
Do we have any authority if they plant in the right of way a tree that is invasive? Can we take it, make them take it down?
I believe the ordinance requires a permit.
Right.
Ordinance speaks to plantings that are located.
So these 9 trees that were planted, we could have them removed. These 9 trees that were planted in the right of way at Radnor Drive, we could have them.
In
removed.
theory.
In theory.
In theory, not. Depends when they planted them and if it was, the ordinance was passed
Right.
that it was invasive species by the state by the time they planted them.
Right.
When did they go in the ground?
Yeah,
Don't
and
know.
like, I don't know when he planted them, and I think it's a wonderful thing that someone went out
Yeah.
and spent 40 or 50 bucks a piece on these trees, because I saw the price tags on them. So my thinking was, you want to encourage people to plant trees, but you want to encourage them to plant the right trees. What if you went to them and said, you know, you can't plant those trees, we need to take them out, but we have a whole bunch of other trees in our tree nursery, and maybe you offer them one of these little, you know, 9 of the little trees as replacement, because they tried to do a good thing, but they did the wrong thing.
How big are those? I don't think they're gonna be real. They're not gonna probably want little trees too, because they wanted the screening. But that's a good point. So thanks for that, Cindy. Yeah, I mean, I think that's all part of the outreach, and certainly if it's on the state's list, we can pair to that. And provide more recommendations on what shouldn't be planted too. So I think that's a good idea. So anywho, all right, anything else? Any more comments? Good. Right, I think Tom's about ready to run out of here. So, all right, with that, I'll call the meeting adjourned at whatever.
8:12.